There's one coming toward, one going away. A running track spreads out the toes because you push off with the front of your foot and it spreads it out. And so it's broader than the heel. And you rock over the center, which leaves a raised center. Now, we didn't know that. We learned that when you get out and you do the science. The burdick track is a running track with the pronated toes, and you see the raised center. It's really, our tracks weren't as good as the burdick. It's finer grained. And so I think all of those answers, all those objections were answered. There's also a large cat track that was found in the area, actually 7 of them. This is the clearest. Well, a large mammal skull is what Dawkins said you'd need to find with the dinosaurs. Well, I think a large mammal foot would have the same implication. And so they have to be carved. Well, we sectioned across the pads here, and you can see that cross section, again photographed under black light. And notice the following contours. Is this one carved? Now, this one likewise, that large mammal foot in this instance obviously isn't. There are other interesting tracks in other places. Antelope Springs, Utah, displays this track. It's a cast and a mold. One fits in the other. Looks like more a shoe or a sandal print. The interesting thing is this is in the Cambrian, and embedded in the heel is a trilobite, which is typical of that Cambrian area. And you see that rolled almost like a roly-poly on the right side there, and then the concave section on the left that fits over. Now, this is, as we suggested, at the very bottom of the column. Now, normally, you don't find human tracks on the bottom of the ocean, which is the kind of environment reflected here. We wouldn't expect to, and normally you don't. But if you ever do once, you know they're not millions of years apart. Interestingly, Reader's Digest made reference to this and says the rock fell open like a book, revealing on one side the footprint itself. The other half slab showed an almost perfect mold and the footprint and the fossil, which they're referring to here, close up here of that trilobite in the heel. If the print is what it appears to be, it would be sufficient to overturn all conventionally accepted ideas of human and geological evolution. Well, yes, that's if it's what it appears to be. It is now at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose. Interestingly, right along the side, some have pointed out maybe indications of stitching. It's possible. I'm not going to affirm that, but it would certainly be consistent with it and kind of looks like it. This is obviously another turvy fossil. We've got several places in Texas where we see these kinds of tracks. This picture doesn't show them that well, but they're pointing to 3 in a right-left sequence. This is the clearest, and this is near Sonora, Texas, down in the southern part. And there are at least 5 clear tracks there that were actually I photographed earlier this year. And then in Stinnett, Texas, which is the opposite, right at the top of Texas, top of the Panhandle, they've had a slab with human footprints in it for the past 30 years on display at the Hutchinson County county seat there of Stinnett County. Very clear track with a child's track beside it, and there's 7 that were found. We have another excavation plan to find some more. And some say, well, maybe this was carved, but this has a unique answer to that. Notice the thin, broken layer that you can see that is very thin and much thinner than the depth of the track. Looking at a side view, you can see that it's much thinner. The track goes down deeper so that if this were carved, it would penetrate that thin layer. And so obviously this isn't carved. That's original impression in the sediment. Excellent evidence. Then in New Mexico, we have this track in the Permian. This is supposed to be 100 million years older than the tracks at Glen Rose, just as clear as it can be. Now, this is a standing track, not a running track. And it's extremely shallow. It's almost impossible to photograph. You have to get the light at the right angle, and it has to be wet, and then it shows up. But it's very, very clear. But this is more like what you would see when you got a wet foot on a tile floor walking along, hourglass shape with the dots at the end. obvious topsy or turvy fossil. In Turkmenistan, there's a plain with all kinds of dinosaurs. This is where the longest consecutive dinosaur track in the world is, the only one longer than the one that we've uncovered. In Pravda, they made this report. The Turkmenian Plateau contains more than 3,000 footprints, but the most mysterious fact is that among the footprints of dinosaurs, footprints of bare human feet were found. We've not been able to get there. I had my visa. We had the fellow who was actually head of the geology department at the University of Turkmenistan had agreed to take us to the site. Paid $1,200 for a visa, and here we go. And now then the government finds out and runs him out of the country because he was going to show us this evidence. He made 3 expeditions to investigate, and in the book Science in the USSR says if we speak about human footprints, it's made by an animal, human-like animal. Incredibly, the footprint is on the same plateau where there are dinosaur tracks. If we speak about the human footprints, well, he says there are 3 trails of human tracks going through the middle, and Pravda reported it that way. We need good pictures, but interesting bit of evidence there. At Glen Rose, we have found this fossil. This is from about 5 miles downstream from where the dinosaur tracks are. That looks amazingly like a human finger, but you find lots of funny-looking rocks that look like things. Is there any way to distinguish? Well, the first thing they say is, well, most fossils are mashed flat, and they're not three-dimensional. Yes, but not so at Glen Rose. For example, about 100 yards from the museum, I found this, and there are hundreds of them there, fossil of a worm, earthworm. Now, if anything's going to be mashed flat, it would be a worm, wouldn't it? But it's still fat and juicy, and it's typical of what you see there at Glen Rose. We sectioned